I don't know if what I heard on that station was human. Maybe it was just an old echo, pulsing through the ice and the silence. Or maybe it was something that should never have been tuned in. My name is Rick Thorne, and I was a radio technician hired by a mining company to oversee emergency broadcasts and maintain communications between camps scattered along the west coast of Alaska. In mid-November, I was transferred to Nome, a remote town nearly buried in snow and surrounded by absolute silence. The job was simple: make sure the radios kept working between the mining sites in the area, especially since winter had swallowed up the roads. But there was one station in particular, marked N104, that was listed in the logs, but no one seemed to know exactly where it was. I was greeted by Dale, the local supervisor, a quiet man, always looking over his shoulder. "Don't worry about N104, he said, handing me the network map. "That station was shut down in the 1980s, but it still transmits," I replied. "I picked up a signal when I passed by the coast. Background noise, static, and a voice." Dale stared at me for several long seconds, then muttered, "Then you should never go there." I ignored the warning, of course. I'm curious by nature, or maybe I'm stubborn. The fact is, that very night I set up my equipment and spent hours trying to triangulate the location of the signal. And the more I adjusted the frequency, the clearer the transmission became. And that's when I heard it for the first time. "Base N104, anyone there?" The voice was faint, as if it had been recorded on an old tape. It repeated in cycles, every 2 minutes. Then came a second snippet, a whisper, barely audible. "Don't turn off the light." The next morning, I got on a snowmobile and headed toward the source of the signal. It took me 3 hours to cross ice, frozen forest, and complete solitude. The sky was white, and the wind seemed to carry voices that were lost in the thin air. Finally, I found the station. Small, gray, with peeling paint. It looked abandoned for decades. The antenna stood upright, slowly turning in the wind. No generators were working, no footprints other than my own. And yet, the tower light was on. I walked in slowly. The door creaked, and a musty, frozen smell invaded my nostrils. The interior was cramped, with old panels, analog dials, reels of magnetic tape, and a central radio with the screen still on. The whole place looked like a museum, but someone kept it, or something. On the table, a diary. The cover was torn, and the pages stuck together. I read what I could. Automatic transmission maintained, but the source of the voice, no one knows where it's coming from. Sometimes it answers questions. Sometimes it repeats things that haven't been said yet. I started recording. I tuned the channel again and listened. "Base N104, anyone there?" This time I answered. "This is Rick Thorne, radio technician. I'm at the station." Silence, then a loud noise, a hiss, like a scream distorted by time, and then, "Rick, you're late." I jumped up. I looked around. "Who's there?" Nothing, until the radio hissed again and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." The temperature inside the station began to drop. The door, which I had left ajar, slammed shut on its own with a loud bang. The radio went out. The lights flickered. And then, a metallic clang from the basement. Yes, there was a hatch in the corner of the floor. I hadn't seen it before. I approached cautiously, turned on my flashlight, and opened it. Narrow steps led down to a subterranean room. I went down. The air was heavy, the silence almost painful. Below, a wall covered with recordings, audio tapes labeled with dates that went up to 2024, but the current year was 2023. I picked up a tape with next week's date. I put it in the recorder. My own voice said, "I can't get out. The station won't let me." I went back upstairs in a panic. I tried the door, locked. I tried the radio, dead. I screamed, nothing. And then, all the lights in the station went out. Only the tape recorder played now, repeating my own voice. "Don't turn off the light. Don't turn off the light." I've been trapped here for hours, or days maybe. Outside, the snow covers everything. Inside, the static never stops. And now, the radio whispers again. N104 base. Rick, are you ready for second warning? Time didn't pass inside the station. Or maybe it passed too quickly. Everything there seemed suspended, as if the clock had stopped along with the world outside. I tried to keep my sanity, telling myself that there was a logical explanation, that the voice was some ancient interference, that the diary was fiction, that the tape with my voice was an absurd coincidence. But the station kept whispering, and I kept hearing myself before I spoke. On the third day, or third night, I can't remember anymore, I tried to break down the door with the iron ladder from the basement. Without success. The metal seemed welded together from the inside, as if it had been melted by extreme heat. I gave up and went back to the tape recorder. There were more tapes. Some were marked with words instead of dates. Answers, cycle, last day. I chose the one with cycle. I put it in the tape player and pressed play. The recording started with static. Then my voice came on, exhausted, hoarser, more broken. You'll try to escape tomorrow. It's no use. The station won't let you. You'll think you've been walking for hours, but you'll always end up back here, because here isn't the same place you came from. I threw the tape away. I went down to the basement, my flashlight nearly dead, trying to find some hidden exit. But at the back of the equipment room, I saw something new. A steel door with a small hatch. I hadn't seen that before. When I looked through the viewfinder, I saw nothing, just darkness and snow. But I heard footsteps in the snow, and then a knock, 3 times. Someone or something outside. I opened the hatch and called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Silence, until I heard my own voice. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I closed the hatch immediately. I climbed up, knocking my knees on the ladder, trying not to panic. When I reached the main room, all the radios were on, but they weren't transmitting static. They were transmitting laughter. Laughter that came in different tones, speeds, depths. Some sounded like children, others like old people, and in the middle of it, mine. I turned off all the radios, one by one, but as soon as the last one was turned off, the station's generator exploded. A flash of light illuminated the room, and all the lights went out. I stood there, in complete darkness, listening to the rapid breathing that I thought was my own, until I realized it was coming from the other room. Someone was imitating me. I grabbed the dim flashlight and went to the entrance. The door was now ajar, although it had been locked minutes before. Outside, the world looked different. The sky was darker than it should have been. The snow fell soundlessly, and the footprints led away, the same footprints as my boots. I followed it for a few yards, into the pine forest. That's when I saw it. Another station, exactly like N104. Same antenna, same broken window, same rusted sign. I ran inside and found myself, sitting, huddled, shivering. "I told you so," he said. "Or I did. It's a cycle, and you just started it all over again. Who are you?" Someone who thought they could fix a radio. And then he was gone, like dust. I ran back to the original station, but it was gone. In its place was just turned snow, old bulldozer tracks, and a fallen, half-buried sign. Facility N104, permanently closed, 1987. Today, I'm somewhere else. A hospital, they say, but the radios here still transmit, even when they're turned off, and the voice I hear on them is still mine, but saying things I haven't experienced yet, and I'll never know if it's me remembering or being remembered. When I first heard about it, I thought it was just another barroom story told by drunk fishermen trying to scare away strangers. When the fog rolls in heavy in Juneau, stay home. If you see someone standing in the street, don't stare too long. The man who said it was named Glenn, his face weathered by the cold, and years at sea. I laughed, ordered another beer, and put the warning in the back of my mind. But that week, the fog came in really thick, and I saw it with my own eyes. My name is Eric Rains. I'm a documentary photographer. I came to Alaska to capture the wildlife, the urban isolation, and the long darkness of winter nights. I arrived in Juneau in late October, just as the city was preparing to hide under the clouds. I had planned to stay for 2 weeks, maybe 3, but when the fog started to fall, I felt paralyzed. I stayed in a small rented apartment near the port. It had everything I needed: silence, internet, and large windows overlooking the empty streets. In the first few days, I photographed frozen forests, wet streets, the thick sea of clouds. But at night, something seemed strange. The silence became too oppressive, and the city seemed smaller. On the night of the 28th, the fog descended like never before, thick, milky, swallowing the city lights. I was in the living room editing photos when I noticed a figure standing on the other side of the street, motionless, in a dark suit, without an umbrella, in the middle of the fog. I instinctively took a picture with the long lens. The stranger didn't move, didn't turn around, didn't go into any house. He stayed there for almost an hour, and then he disappeared. The next morning, I went to show the picture to the owner of an antique shop where I had bought an old map of the city, an old man named Oscar with sunken eyes and shaking hands. When he saw the picture, his face lost all color. "You saw him." "Who?" "The man in the fog." According to Oscar, reports of that same figure have been appearing in old city archives since the 1920s, always on the same kind of night, always on the same kind of street. Nobody knows where he comes from. He never talks. He never moves. But when you look at him too long— What? Oscar just pointed to a painting on the wall. A smiling woman, her hair tied back, wearing a World War II nurse's uniform. That was my sister. She saw it. I swallowed hard. What happened to her? She disappeared. That should have been enough to make me walk away. But I did the opposite. I installed automatic cameras on the street. I programmed motion sensors. I spent the nights watching. In the early hours of the 31st, while the city slept under the fog, he came back. Same spot, same pose. But this time, he turned his head. My breath caught. The camera lens shook. His face was partially visible, and it was featureless, smooth, pale, as if it had been erased. And yet, he saw me. I felt it, even from the window, even hidden. I felt as if the eyes he didn't have were glued to me. I ran to the bathroom. I locked myself in. The silence was total. After a while, I heard footsteps, slowly moving away, and then knocking on the door. But not from the bathroom, from the apartment door. I waited until dawn. When I finally gathered the courage to go out, he was no longer there, but something was there, a mark on the camera lens, like a palmed hand, made of mist. On the screen, the last photo taken was distorted, as if the file had been corrupted at the exact moment he saw me. I went back to Oscar that same day. "Did you take a picture of him?" he asked, desperate. "Yes." "Delete it. Burn it. Throw it in the sea." "Why?" "Because he doesn't like to be remembered." That night, the mist entered the house, not through the door, through the walls, through the ceiling, as if it were breathing with me. I lay on the couch, cell phone in hand, trying to keep my sanity, and then he appeared again, inside my reflection, in the living room mirror, standing behind me, faceless, nameless, but now, inside my house. That night, I slept with all the lights on, the mirror in the living room covered with a sheet, the radio turned on static, the cell phone in airplane mode, but none of that helped, because when I closed my eyes, he was already there, not in my dreams, in reality. I woke up to the sound of dripping, but there was no water. The ceiling was dry, so was the floor. The sound came from the bedroom. I walked slowly, feeling the air get denser. The sheet over the mirror trembled, even with the windows closed, and when I lifted the corner to look, I saw my reflection smiling. But I wasn't smiling. My face was still, and the reflection had eyes. I ran outside, tripping over the camera cables. I went to the street, hoping to find movement, people, anything that would get me out of it, but the entire city disappeared into the mist. Literally, the buildings were gone, the lights were swallowed, the ground looked like it was made of damp cotton, and in the center of it all, standing still, as always, him, the man in the mist, black suit, faceless, motionless, staring at me, or at least feeling that I was staring at him. And the more I stared at him, the more I felt my memories fading. I ran to Oscar's house. I knocked. I screamed. He opened it, eyes wide, as if he already knew. "Did you see him again?" he asked, breathless. He came in. He came into my house. Oscar pulled me inside, closed all the curtains, turned off the lights. He comes in when you try to understand him, when you try to record, capture, remember. But what is he? Oscar hesitated. Something old, a mistake, a rift between worlds. It has no name because the name has been forgotten, and it feeds on that. Feeds on what? What you are. On the wall of Oscar's basement, there were old newspaper clippings, disappearances, all on foggy nights, all in the same area, some names crossed out, others without faces. "What do you keep these for?" I asked. "To remember who I was." "What do you mean?" Oscar showed me an old photo, 2 boys. One of them was him, the other, his face was blurred out. He was my brother. He disappeared in 1949, and after a while, no one remembered him anymore. Not my parents, not the school, only me. "Did you try to look for him?" "I tried, but the more I tried, the more I forgot." "What now?" Oscar took a deep breath. "Now it's your turn." I went back to the apartment before nightfall. When I opened the door, the mirror in the living room was clean, no sheets, and in the reflection, he was sitting on my couch, as if he was waiting for me. I looked back, nothing, but in the mirror, he turned his head and murmured, "You already know how it ends." The pictures on the camera were gone. The hard drive was empty. The name Eric Rains had disappeared from the hotel records. My emails had been returned. My bank account was empty. It was as if I was being erased. On my last attempt, I grabbed my camera and went to the port. The fog was already taking over everything. I stood there, waiting, and when he appeared, I raised the camera, but this time, not to take a picture. I pointed the lens at myself, and I said out loud, "My name is Eric Rains. I was born in Seattle. I'm a photographer, and I remember." The fog trembled. The sound stopped. He finally approached, unhurriedly, and when he was just a few steps away, I saw my own face under the fog, but without eyes, without a mouth, without memory. The camera fell. The image froze. Today, I write this the only way I can, in a notebook, left on Oscar's doorstep, because I know he still remembers, and someone needs to remember me, before the man in the fog takes me away for good, or worse, before I become him. When you live long enough in Alaska, you begin to understand that silence has layers. There's the silence of the snow covering everything, muffling sounds like a cold blanket. Then there's the silence of the forests, deep, ancient, as if something were hiding among the tree trunks. But worst of all is the silence that comes from the sky. It's a kind of emptiness that seems to watch you. It was in that silence that I found the briefcase, and since then, nothing has been the same. My name is Jake Thorne. I fly small transport planes in northern Alaska. I work with cargo, mail, medical supplies, basically anything that can be transported by air between the small towns forgotten by time. Last March, I was flying over the Kobuk region when I spotted something strange on the ice below. It wasn't a runway or a cabin. It was a glint, a metallic glint, half buried in the snow, in the middle of nowhere. I sped up and made an impromptu landing in a clearing. I left the engine running and walked over with the radio strapped to my shoulder and my hand on the flashlight. What I found was a black suitcase, partially covered in ice. It was hard, heavy, with chrome latches and a corroded metal label. Flight 162, federal property. I took the suitcase with me. I couldn't open it until I got home to Fairbanks. It didn't have a traditional lock, but rather an old-fashioned magnetic system. With some effort, I managed to unlock it. Inside were a reel-to-reel tape recorder with the tape still intact, a name tag reading M. Doyle, Special Operations, a yellowed photograph of a military plane in the snow, a small notebook with handwritten notes. The tape was labeled with the date, November 2nd, 1971, final. I don't know why, but I didn't take the suitcase to the police. Something about that discovery made me feel like she didn't want anyone else to find her. That night, I listened to the recording. The audio was crackling, but slowly, a voice emerged. But the weirdest thing was that it was my voice. Flight 162, this is Thorne. We're seeing something. It wasn't part of the mission. It's like an aurora, but it's moving. It's looking. Crawl, then screams, metal twisted, and then whispers, words in a language I didn't know, but understood perfectly. We never crashed. We're just out of time. I threw the recorder on the floor. I went to the sink and splashed water on my face. But when I came back, the case was closed again, and the tape was gone. In the days that followed, I began to have strange dreams. I was flying over unknown regions. The stars in the sky changed places. There was no sound, no wind, just a voice in the background, repeating numbers in sequence, 162, 162, 162. And then, the plane crashed. Always. But I never died. I just woke up with blood coming out of my nose. I researched Flight 162. No information. No recorded crash. No pilot named Doyle. But a friend at air traffic control, after much insistence, confessed, "Man, that number shouldn't exist. It shows up as redacted." "What do you mean?" "It's as if it had flown, but never landed." I went back to the place where I found the suitcase. I took a drone with an infrared camera. I flew over the area, and something appeared. A plane, half buried, invisible to the naked eye. Only with infrared could you see its shape. I landed the drone and went on foot. I walked for hours. The compass kept spinning. When I found the wreckage, I understood everything. Because the plane was the same one in the photo inside the suitcase. And what was inside it? It was my body, frozen, sitting in the cockpit, with my jacket, my badge, and my hand holding the same suitcase. I ran back, but I couldn't find my way back to the plane or to my own plane. I was stuck there for 2 nights, but no one believes me. Today the suitcase disappeared from my locker, but the recording came back to my phone, even though I never scanned it. And when I hit play, the voice speaking now is no longer mine. It's that of a man who says, "Flight 162, still en route. Estimated arrival, never." Ever since the day I found my own body inside that plane, my life has been a series of emptinesses. I can no longer trust mirrors, reflections, voices, or memory. Everything seems unstable. I returned to Fairbanks covered in ice and mud, walking until I found a road. I was taken to the hospital and diagnosed with hypothermia and mental confusion. But I knew that I was not the same man who had entered those woods. And the missing suitcase, it came back on the 3rd day of hospitalization, at the foot of my bed, without anyone seeing who put it there. This time I didn't have to force the locks. It opened by itself, and inside there was no more recorder, just a note, handwritten. "You flew, Jake. Now you need to land." Folded next to the paper was an old boarding pass, stamped with Flight 162 check-in reactivated. That night, I had the worst dream. I was in a cockpit. Beside me, my older body, lifeless, frozen, stared at me with open eyes and a sewn-up mouth. The radio crackled. A control tower called to me. "Flight 162, position." I don't know where I am." "Then stay on course." "Course to where?" "To yourself." I woke up screaming. The nurses said I'd been having seizures, but I knew what it was. It was the plane trying to pull me back. A few days later, I went to the same air traffic controller who told me about the redacted flight. "Jake, you've got to stop this. That flight existed. I saw it. I saw my body." He hesitated. "Look, I found a radar recording. It's from 1971. No one should have that. But I did." He showed me an old spectrogram. Amid the static, a route appeared. A dot blinked red. "That was 162, he said. "But the weird thing is, it never left the screen. It just sat there, still, for hours, days. And then what? We turned off the radar, but when we turned it back on, it was still there. I went back to where I'd found the briefcase. This time I brought a portable radio, and at 2:43 a.m., a frequency opened by itself. "Jake Thorne, cleared for landing." "Negative, I'm not in the air, I'm on the ground." "You never landed, Jake." "What's this place?" "Come in, for the last time." The wind blew hard, pushing the snow in a specific direction. I followed it, more out of instinct than reason. And there it was. The plane, still, frozen, just like before, but now, with the lights on, and the door open. I climbed the steps, guided by something that wasn't courage. It was as if my feet knew the way. Inside the cabin, everything was clean, working. Lights, dials, controls. In the pilot's chair, my reflection. Literally, I could see myself. But I was older, tired eyes, unshaven. He stared at me. "Ready to land?" he asked. "What's this?" "That's you, Jake. After the landing that never happened." "I don't understand." "You fell, but not in the way you think. You fell out of time, and now, someone has to keep the cycle going." "What if I don't want to?" He smiled. "Then you'll never get out of here again." I ran out of the cabin. I jumped down the stairs. The plane disappeared behind me, as if it had never been there. Today, I live in a strange state. I no longer sleep. I do not dream, but I listen to the radio, always. And every night, at 2:43 a.m., the same message appears on frequency 162.0. "Jake Thorne, cleared for landing." And every time, my answer is the same: refused. But I know that one day, the voice on the radio will change, and it will no longer be me who answers. It will be Jake who has already landed, and when that happens, Flight 162 will be complete. Alaska is unforgiving to those who like to wander alone. I learned that too late. My name is Alan Mercer. I'm a cartographer and geologist working for a company that maps changes in permafrost around the Arctic Circle. 3 months ago, I was sent to Utqiagvik, formerly Barrow, the northernmost point in the United States, where the sun doesn't rise for months during the winter, and the ice seems to swallow time. It was supposed to be a routine mission: spend 2 weeks at an outpost, collect soil samples, record coordinates with drones and satellites, and return before the cold reached the point of uninhabitability. But on the 8th day, I saw the footprints, and everything changed. It was a dark January morning, minus 35 degrees Celsius, and the wind cutting like a knife. I had set out on my snowmobile toward a fresh patch of exposed ground, a thermal anomaly that had shown up on the radar. After a few hours in the field, something caught my eye on the thermal imager: a heat trail, footprints, recent, human, and the strangest thing, they weren't coming from anywhere. They started in the middle of the ice in a straight line and headed south. I followed the tracks for almost a kilometer. No branches, no sign of equipment, camp, or vehicle. Barefoot footprints in the middle of the Arctic. And then, they disappeared, out of nowhere, in the middle of a flat field of ice. I went back to the base station trying to explain it to myself. I thawed my fingers as I reviewed the thermal images, looking for some flaw, some technical explanation. But they were there, clear, deep, a precise march, footprints of someone who shouldn't exist. That night, I stayed awake. The station's generator hummed weakly. The light flickered at times, as if the cold was overcoming the structure. At 3:12 a.m., the external motion detector beeped. I walked over to the monitor screen and saw it, footprints appearing, alone, no body, no shadow, just footprints appearing, one after another, leading from the frozen forest to the side of the station. I ran to the door. I opened it with the flashlight in my hand. Nothing, but the prints were there, in the ice, fresh, perfect, from someone or something. I radioed a colleague the next day. Jared, the technician at the base in Prudhoe Bay, thought I was delirious from the isolation. "Alan, that's just ice, refraction, blowing snow. You're seeing what you want to see." "I have pictures, Jared. So what are you going to do? Follow them to the sea?" He laughed. I hung up, but by then, my mind was made up. The next night, the footprints came back at exactly 3:12 a.m., and this time, they circled the station, and they left a mark on the door, a handprint, no fingers, just the shape of something trying to imitate a hand. On the third night, I went out with a flashlight, GPS, and emergency rifle. I waited for the footprints to appear and followed them. With each step, the sensation grew worse. It was like walking in a field where time did not exist. The footprints descended through a valley of packed snow, circled an ancient stone, and then disappeared again. But there, in the middle of nowhere, there was something. A cabin, blackened wood, covered in snow, barely visible in the darkness, and the door, ajar. I went in. The beam of the flashlight revealed walls covered in markings, carved symbols, spirals, names repeated over and over. In the center, a rocking chair, and in it, a figure covered in a blanket. I thought it was a mannequin, but as I approached, the thing was breathing, slowly and deeply. "Who are you?" I asked, not expecting an answer. The thing didn't move, but then behind me, the door closed by itself, and the voice came, not from the chair, but from the wall. "You followed them. Now they're following you." I ran. I ran back to the station, desperate. But when I looked at the floor, footprints were following me, and now they weren't just outside. They were inside, to the bathroom, to the kitchen, to my bedroom, and they stopped right behind my bed. On the last night, before the rescue helicopter arrived, I left a camera on the tripod. When I developed the images, I saw them. During the early morning, footprints appeared. The door opened, and a white silhouette crossed the room, with no eyes, no mouth, but walking like a person. At the end of the video, the thing stopped in front of the camera and stayed there, staring, for 3 hours and 12 minutes, until daybreak. The footage from the night before stuck in my head like a virus. For days, even after I left Barrow and returned to Anchorage, I saw that white figure every time I closed my eyes. The shape of it, the way it stood still, the amount of time it spent watching the camera, as if it knew it was being filmed, or worse, as if it was waiting for me. I tried to move on with my life. I turned in the reports, deleted the copies of the footage from my laptop, discarded the mission materials. But the next night, I received an email. No sender, no title, just a video file, the same one from the cabin, but with 2 more minutes at the end. I opened it. The figure, after standing still for hours, was moving closer to the lens. The image was shaking. Static filled the screen. And then, it was whispering, in a low, freezing voice that seemed to speak inside my chest. "There's still snow under your feet, Alan. You never left there." I dropped the notebook on the floor. The clock read 3:12 a.m., the same time the footprints appeared, the same time the world seemed to turn upside down. The next morning, I went to the company lab to get the drone data used in the mission. The analysis technician took me aside. "Are you sure you were alone, Alan?" "Yes. Why?" She showed me a thermal sequence. One of the images showed 2 heat sources moving side by side on the ice field. "That was on the 11th, she said. "One of the signals is yours, but the other has no record of departure. It starts from nowhere." "And where does it go?" It still goes, even today, even with no one there. I caught the first flight back to Barrow. I didn't tell anyone. I just took a recorder, a thermal camera, and a question. What had followed me that night? Was it still there? In the abandoned station, the door was ajar, even though it had been locked before I left. On the floor, the footprints appeared again, but now they weren't just going to my room. They were going up the walls, and on the ceiling of the room was my shadow, but upside down, and it blinked, as if to say, "You took your time." I went to the cabin. It was more deteriorated, as if it had aged 50 years in a few days. Inside, the chair was still rocking, but there was no one, just the tape recorder, working. I pressed play. The voice that came out of it was mine. The cycle begins with the footprint and ends with oblivion. Those who follow will be followed. Those who seek will be found. And then, one last sentence. Are you ready to be left behind? As I left, the forest was different, denser, darker. The compass was spinning. The GPS was freezing. And then I realized there were no more footprints of mine, only theirs. And they were all pointing to me, surrounding, waiting. That's when I felt the ice give way beneath my feet. And I heard, from the bottom of the abyss, 3:12 a.m., 3:12 a.m., 3:12 a.m. I woke up in a military hospital days later. They said they found me delirious near the coast, dehydrated with no memory, with advanced hypothermia. But what no one explains is how I came back with clean boots, not a grain of ice, not a drop of moisture, and the camera in my pocket, with the recording intact. In the final video, it's not me holding the lens. It's a white hand, elongated, with only 3 fingers, and the screen ends with a sentence, written on the display, "Now it's your turn to leave footprints." Since then, every morning at 3:12 a.m., I hear footsteps on the roof of the apartment, and on the floor of the hallway, wet footprints appear, always heading towards my door, and then they disappear. But one of them, that night, stopped on the threshold, without moving forward, as if to say, not today, but one day, it will say, now. Few people take a job at the end of the world. Even fewer stay long enough to hear what the wind whispers behind the walls. But I went. I went because I needed to disappear. I needed to forget. I needed to hide from myself. And that's how I ended up as the new keeper of the Eldred Rock Lighthouse, a tiny island south of Haines, in the frozen heart of Alaska. My name is Liam Walker, ex-sailor, ex-husband, ex-many things. I got the offer by email. Looking for a keeper for a decommissioned station at Eldred Rock. Duties, surveillance, wind and tide recording, basic maintenance, lonely, even better. The only requirement? Record an audio report every night. The boat dropped me off at the island on a morning of pale skies and gray seas. The lighthouse was bigger than I'd imagined. 3 stories, peeling paint, windows covered in salt and rust. The interior smelled musty and lonely, but it was clean, organized, almost lived in, as if someone still lived there. I spent the first day adjusting generators, testing radios, and exploring the floors. In the basement, I found old files, labeled folders, recordings on reels of tape, many with the same name, Jonah Pike, Chief Lighthouse Keeper. His last recording was from 1983, but strangely, the tapes seemed too new. That first night, I recorded my report. My voice was shaky, trying to sound professional. Day 1, clear skies, calm seas, no anomalies, temperatures below freezing, everything normal. I hung up. That was when the station's radio turned on by itself. Static, then a voice. Pike's log, day 1019. The seas are different. I stopped. I rewound the tape. I listened again. It was an old recording. It had to be, but when I looked at the tape reel, it was empty. The next morning, I explored the lens room, the top of the lighthouse. The view was breathtaking. Ocean as far as the eye could see, ice, sky, and nothing else. But there was something on the glass of the lens, fingerprints, as if someone had touched the inside, leaving a trail in the accumulated salt. And outside, on the damp rocks that surrounded the base of the tower, I saw footprints, a precise, deep line pointing straight to the door, but none of them were going away. On night 2, the radio turned on by itself again. Pike's log, day 1032. He knocked on the door again. At 3:20, I almost called out to him, but my mouth wouldn't open. I turned off the radio. I closed all the doors. I locked the windows. And at 3:20, I heard the knock, 3 knocks, loud, at the front door. I stood there, frozen in the dark. She knocked again, 3 times, and then silence. The next day, I listened to Pike's recordings again. Every night, the same pattern. Technical reports, silence, and then fear. He spoke of something out at sea, something approaching in the fog, standing outside, calling to him. She asks me to turn on the light, says she's lost, but if I turn it on, she'll come in. The 3rd night, I turned on the light. I don't know why I did it. Maybe curiosity, maybe arrogance. But as soon as the rotating light activated, the island shook, literally. The generator blew, the lens went out, and then the radio came back on, without me touching it. Pike's record, day 1045. I turned it on. Now I can't turn it off. It's everywhere, on the walls, on the glass, on me. I heard a sound upstairs. I ran to the lens, and there, in the reflection of the glass, someone was watching me. I fled downstairs. I locked the door. I grabbed my tape recorder and realized it was already recording itself. On the tape, it wasn't my voice. It was Jonah Pike's. If you're listening to this, it's too late. The lighthouse no longer guides ships. It traps what shouldn't have escaped. The recording ends with a whisper. She knows your name now, Liam. Today is my 4th day. The sea is calm. The sky is clear. No boats in sight. But the lens turned on its own this morning, and on the walls of the middle floor, someone wrote in salt, "Don't let the light go out. I'm afraid to sleep, afraid to hear more recordings I never made, afraid to open the door and find her waiting outside. I haven't slept in 4 nights, and not for lack of tiredness, but because the lighthouse's light never went out again. Even with the generator turned off, the wires cut, the main switch ripped from the wall. The light keeps turning, like an eye watching everything, or watching only me." The morning after that first night when the lens turned on its own, I found marks on the iron steps of the tower. Wet, long footprints, as if they had been left by someone walking with very, very thin, bare feet. They went from the top of the lighthouse to my room and stopped in front of my bed. I spent the day going through the old files at the base. I found Jonah Pike's complete diary. The last notes seemed to have been written in a hurry, as if he knew he didn't have much time. Day 1048. The light no longer obeys me. She appears every night, sometimes outside, sometimes in the mirror. She started talking to me in my voice. Today I saw my reflection blink, but I didn't blink. If anyone finds this, never turn on your headlights. The pen stops abruptly. The next page is blank, and the others are torn out. That night, I locked all the doors. I barricaded myself with furniture. I turned off all the radios. I stuffed cotton in my ears. But at 3:23 a.m., I heard it, her voice, not with my ears, but inside my head. "Liam, the light has seen you. You're part of the island now." The lens spun faster. The room at the top pulsed with a strange energy, as if it were trying to pull me in. The next morning, I noticed that the water had stopped running. The pipes were frozen. But when I went to the reservoir, I saw that it wasn't ordinary ice. It was salt, crystallized coarse salt, climbing up the walls of the box as if it were alive. And then I understood. The island is closing me in, locking me in here, like it did with Jonah. I went to the base of the tower, where there was a sealed hatch. It was locked, with a thick chain and a rusty padlock, but next to it, I found a key. It was warm, even in the polar cold. I opened it. The hold went down further than it should have, almost as if it went deeper than the island would allow. The walls were wet stone, dark, covered with ancient symbols carved in circles, and at the bottom, a metal door with something carved on it. The sea needs eyes. I went back up. I picked up the radio and tried to contact the supply boat. Eldred Rock Base calling. Can someone copy me? Static. Then a reply, but it was my voice. Eldred Rock, this is Liam Walker. Everything is under control. The light is safe. It's not time to leave yet. I hung up, but the radio turned on again, by itself. You haven't finished the cycle yet, Liam. That night, I heard footsteps upstairs. I went upstairs with my heart racing, and at the top of the tower, in front of the rotating lens, there I was, not a reflection, myself, standing, looking out to sea, wearing my jacket. He turned his face. It was me, but without eyes, and he said, "The light needs a guardian. Now it's your turn." And he disappeared into the brightness that exploded from the lens. Since then, every dawn at 3:23, I go up, because the light calls. If I don't go, it spins on its own, faster, hotter, more alive. It shows images that I don't know if they are memories or omens. It shows ships sinking. It shows faces screaming underwater. And it shows me sitting here, writing this, stuck, tired, part of the rotation. Today is 7 days. No boats have come. No planes have passed. The radio only responds with my own voice. And now the lens doesn't spin on its own anymore. It obeys me, because now I am the lighthouse keeper, and this island is my home, or maybe my prison. If anyone finds this notebook, take it, but be careful with the light. If it sees you, it will remember, and it will want you too.